This is the Slots and Sockets podcast, episode number 47. I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime,
Turbo Penguin.
Happy Monday to you, Turbo. So, we've been watching the news lately, and NVIDIA's, since our last show even, NVIDIA has just kind of had a rough go of things with Blackwell.
You know, they absolutely have. It's really interesting. Like, you start to take a look at, and you start hearing rumors back and forth, and it's hard to not see some of these things and start to raise questions about, like, I don't know, when you hear so many different things going on, like the absolute lack of supply. The pricing debacle, the notion that we still have cards that are burning up, or cables that are burning up. And, even though NVIDIA was very adamant that they haven't had issues, and, now we've got another version. And, to be honest, at this point, I don't know really how much you can really trust NVIDIA here. I mean, they said, at the launch of the 50 series that, there is absolutely zero more burning up problems anymore. It's a non-issue. That's right. Exactly what they said. And we have 5080s that have charred connectors, and we still have a number of 5090s that are burning up connectors. And so, you start to ask the question, and, you have a lot of people who are starting to look at this and saying, wait a second, this isn't a 40 series, like, fail point. Like, this is a continuation of the same fail point. Time and time again.
Even.
Yeah, and absolutely worsening. I mean, and I think a lot of these problems are exaggerated by NVIDIA's, poor planning. I mean, what I don't understand is that, I have the sinking suspicion that Blackwell was originally slated and taped out. It was designed to be on 3 nanometer. And when 3 nanometer couldn't make it, they moved it to the 4 nanometer. Now, there's a performance hit by going regressive backwards into a 4 nanometer. And so my guess is that the 3 nanometer, they were looking at a performance target and a power target. When you go back to the 4, you now are realizing, oh shoot, now my performance and my power targets are not the same. And so what you're having to do is trade off to give more power. The problem is that at 600 watts safely, that's where this 12 volt high power connector is limited. Yeah. What I don't understand is why NVIDIA didn't make changes to the power layout and design, because there's so many things they could have done. What they could have done is they could have leveled off the 6, power connectors so that no one cable got over, like, way over on the current.
Right.
They didn't do that. They could have done that and put 2 connectors. Again, they didn't do that. And so time and time again, they just kept on, like, whatever, that'll do. And, it's like, how long, how many times of that'll do does it bite you? And it feels like with NVIDIA, like, every time we look at this, another turn of the corner, it's like, it's more of just not good things. And for gamers, like, guys, you've got to realize, like, I sort of think that this was rushed out the door, and I don't think this is ready for prime time.
No.
The real question that I have is, we start asking real questions here. I asked the question, A, I don't think it's ready. B, we know we have some drivers issues. There's some PCI Express issues that the number of users are having. And we get to a point where a number of problems are with the missing ROPs, and that goes to a yield issue. Because it's my understanding that that's 100% an NVIDIA issue. It's not a BIOS problem. It's not a design manufacturer issue. it is purely these things failed after, now I don't know necessarily if QA should have caught these. That's a good question. I don't know. Um, I know every manufacturer has a different level of what QA is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm wondering if now they're actually going to start looking. Maybe that's something that they didn't look at before, and now
Possibly.
they're like,
Yep.
"Oh shoot, we didn't even look at this." That's my guess. And we saw this on a Zotac board, and then Nvidia came out and said, "Oh yeah, it's an issue. We've seen it on less than half of a percent." Now I call bullcrap on
Yeah.
that because that means one out of every 200 cards is affected by this. I don't know if there's 200 cards out in the public. I
Right.
mean, they
Well,
haven't made that many of these cards.
and from my understanding, it's impacting the 5070 and the 5080 as well.
Yeah. Even though, yeah,
So yeah, that no,
they
don't.
did say NVIDIA did come out and said, yeah, it's an issue. We're aware of it. And they said it's an issue with the 90 and the 70 Ti. And then we've heard of multiple people on Reddit show GPU Z showing the 5080
Mm-hmm.
with it missing ROPs. So
Yep.
this is a 50 series issue. The other thing is we've heard that the 50, the 70, the vanilla 70, and to what I understand, the 60, because they're on the same die,
Mm-hmm.
are having yield issues. I'm starting to wonder because at the beginning, like one of the things that we had heard about Blackwell at the beginning is that yields were actually looking good.
Right.
I sort of now question like maybe they weren't, and this is why we don't have a ton of supply. It could be that NVIDIA took a ton of the wafer dimensions and we're pushing that towards data center,
Mm-hmm.
or to AI chips. That's possible. But what I don't understand is if that's the case, the ROP thing comes back to a yield problem.
Yeah.
And if that's manifesting itself on end user cards that are actually hitting users, the fault question I have is like, if I have a 5090, is that something that I need to be aware of that might fail down the road where instead of having the full ROPs, then I now get less? Um, it does ask a question because, I mean, in all honesty, like, you're losing and they're like, well, it's only 4%. Well, that's interesting because
On a
people are saying
5090.
uh,
Yeah.
people are saying it's a bigger percentage. And especially at the 80 and the 70 Ti series,
Mm-hmm.
like it
It's a
just
bigger
seems
portion.
like Nvidia was pushing this in every which way, shape, or form. Like they were pushing it, and I feel like the reason that all of this gets pushed is because they were pushing to get it out
Mm-hmm.
before anyone had anything. And the honest truth is that the 9070 really, I don't know, was ever going to be super competitive against the 4090. They didn't need to. What I don't understand is why they just didn't hold Blackwell until 3 nanometer was better. And they could have actually, because I think, we all complain about the generational like difference between 40 and 50.
Yeah.
And everyone that we talk to is like, yeah, I mean, sure, if you're a 5090, there's some improvement. And I would say that yeah, I would agree with that. I just don't think that we're seeing the generational improvement. Um, I don't know how quickly you could technically resolve this, and I don't necessarily know if we'll see like a refresh Blackwell on 3 nanometer. I mean, NVIDIA is really good at doing refreshes. Um, look, it's really clear. I would not. I was talking to my brother, and he has, a 30 series, and he's like, and he's trying to get more performance for VR.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Um, I just am to the point where I'm not interested in being a guinea pig or a beta tester, and
Yeah.
I sort of
Exactly.
feel like that's what it is. Now, the other weird thing, just rolling into, because me and him were talking about this, and we've had some people have talked about this online, that there's a question of, and I really want NVIDIA to kind of figure out where and finally resolve these burning cables problem.
Mm-hmm.
There obviously is a problem where we have cards that are where cables are getting way too hot.
Yep.
I believe it's NVIDIA's duty to figure out what the heck is going on with these and to figure out where the problem lies.
Yeah.
And one of the things that me and my brother were noticing, like we both had bought power supplies very, very recently. Okay. He bought a Corsair 1000 watt. I bought a Lian Li 1000 watt Edge. Surprisingly, his power supply from Corsair is ATX 3.0 compliant.
Mm-hmm.
The newer version of his power supply, which is like an extra $80 now, is ATX 3.0 certified.
Hmm.
Now, what's odd is that Asus has a new model that's 3.0 or 3.1 certified. Be Quiet has a certified model that's brand new. Um, Basically, all of the big, the big manufacturers within the last month quietly have released new models that change the wording from compliant to certified. Now, they've done this very quietly, and it makes us wonder, like, this is odd. Why would and on a lot of websites there is no delineation between certified versus compliant. And in
Right.
fact, even then, like you actually have to go to the model number and to see the difference between certified versus compliant to see if yours is, and to actually go to the manufacturer to find out what it is. Um, I find it very interesting that we start having these issues, and now power supply manufacturers are saying, "Well, ours is certified now." I'm wondering. I have no idea, but I do beg the question of like, is this part of the problem? And behind the scenes, very quietly, we're all like, "Well, you don't have a certified power supply. Yours is just compliant." Um, Very, very interesting, because the other thing is we came across is that, there's a difference between there's 80 plus certifications and there's a new cybernetics certification. And I just think there needs to be some clarity as to where the problem lies, so gamers can make sure that they're safe in playing games. Like I just have the dumb question, like if these are just bad cards, and they just should come out and say, look, these were some bad cards. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I really believe it's probably a mismatch of cards versus power supplies and some incompatibility between these.
Yeah.
And it really comes back to NVIDIA to figure out what the heck is going on so we stop this once and for all. They sit there and blame third party cables. I am to the point where it's like, no, you can't use the cable thing again.
No.
The cable is
Well,
not like, I
yeah.
would say if you have a shoddy cable, yeah, okay. But I don't believe that in general these cables are necessarily the problem.
Right.
I don't think third party cables, because at that point, I would make the argument that every cable is a third party cable from NVIDIA's perspective. Unless NVIDIA is going to start making, 12-volt 2x6 cables. But even then, I would make the argument then that's not going to be compliant with my power supply. So, NVIDIA, you got to sort this crap out
Yeah.
and say, here's where it is. I just don't know if they'll actually do it.
I don't think they will. And I'll tell you why I don't think they will. It
Because
goes
that
back to
would
the design
mean,
of the board. It goes
yeah,
back to the base designs of the boards, because we have a situation where we're putting we'll just take the 5090 as the extreme example. We're putting 600 watts of power through a connector that is designed to at max handle 660 watts. That's a 10% overhead. You talk to anybody that I know in electrical engineering in that sort of situation, a lot of bad things can happen in that 10% to put you well over the 10%. And on top of that, you have all of the power coming in through what's effectively a single rail. So the card's not doing any kind of monitoring, it's not doing any kind of testing or checking to make sure that the power is coming in evenly or it's being a good citizen of the system. And there's also zero protection on the board as far as the power stages. Because one of the common failure modes on graphics cards these days is your power stage goes dead short and sends a solid 12 volts to whatever's on the other side of it. And Zotac, to their credit, on the 4080s and 4090s, did fuse the power coming in. So if they had a power stage that all of a sudden was pulling 150, 200 amps and trying to send 12 volts to your core, you had a chance of potentially saving the GPU core when your power stage blows up. And it's not a question of if. It is absolutely a question of when, because you will have a power stage blow up. I've had power stages blow up on my cards. I haven't this generation with my 6900 XT, which I said again correctly. Yay. Yeah, I'm making that the running joke of the podcast for now. So, I have blown a power stage on my 6900 XT, and God forbid I don't blow one in the next several months until this whole GPU thing shakes out, and I can decide whether I want to keep this card or potentially upgrade to a 9070 XT. But the problem is that NVIDIA designed the cards with the expectation that everything coming in would be 100% safe. You and I have worked in technology for most of our lives. Since when has anything to do with computing been 100% safe and guaranteed and working flawlessly?
The other piece I would say is like I just feel like you know power supply is notorious for like I don't know. I just feel like
Yeah.
that power supplies are just not the most. I don't know. I just feel a little iffy about power supplies in general, and I'll just say that there's not very many different manufacturers of power supplies.
Yeah.
So, um, and
Most of
I
them
question
order from the same 3 or 4 ODMs and then slap their name on it.
exactly. And I make the question like, who's responsible? Like, is like when ASUS does this and they come in and build a power supply or a brand of power supply, like, are they just going to whoever the ODM is and saying, or do they go to the ODM and say, like, do they come and say, this is what we want, you need to make this? Or do they go and say, what do you have available right now? That looks good. Let's do this version with a 850, 1000, and a 1300 watt, and cool. And then that's what it is. And there's really no difference between the ASUS and the MSI of the same tape layout of the same
Right.
manufacturer. Like is FSP, because I know that they make them, and I know
Mm-hmm.
Flower is another big one.
Super
Like
flower.
if
Yep.
I have a super flower, so if I go in and I'm an ODM and MSI and me are making the same one, and I use the same ODM super flower, are they the same? And or do I have any like design creativity other than just like the aesthetic of what it looks like?
That's a solid maybe.
See,
So
and that's
the
where I
the
just
thing
don't feel good
so
about
I can
those.
help you there. I can help you. So where the differences lie is if you're talking like the low end speed running and exploding power supply gigabyte models. They're doing what you're talking about there, where it's just like, okay, well, this is the power level we want to hit. Just give us whatever you got. And then they ship out the power supply and they say it's got the 80 plus rating. The cybernetics thing is actually very interesting. They actually have a rigorous testing protocol that clearly defines what their certification does. And so I would recommend, instead of looking at the 80 plus stuff, because that's been gamed all to crap, start looking for cybernetics certifications on power
So
supplies,
okay,
because
so
those
and
are
this
far more stringent.
okay,
But
but let's just stop here for let's just talk
sure,
about the cybernetics. If that's better, then someone needs to say like Nvidia needs to say this works and this doesn't.
but that's the thing,
Like
is
the
like Nvidia's not going to
cybernetics,
say that. And I'll tell you why, because it's going to put them on the hook for warranty stuff. Nvidia just says,
I think that
here's the
they're on the
power
hook for
supply.
warranty stuff right now. I mean, how many
I
cards
agree.
don't have, and maybe the question I come back to is to say, okay, if we have all these cards that don't have ROPS, is this a power issue coming in?
No, more than likely not. More than likely, it's bad silicon. That and so to kind of go back to that, I think what's happening there with the ROPS is the cards, the cores are coming into the add-in board manufacturers with good working tested conditions, because I don't think Nvidia is shipping known bad parts. Um, but the reason escapes like this happen is because either they have a hole in their testing methodology, or what I suspect may be happening, like we saw with 13th and 14th gen, the cards test fine, they go through all the QA, they get to the consumer's hands, and then you start putting the workload to it, and it cooks off a portion of the GPU. That's why I think we're seeing them die in clusters of 8, because if I remember correctly from the architecture, they are built in clusters of portions of GPUs. Now, getting back to our power supply discussion, on the low end, they just tell the manufacturer, hey, just slap our name on whatever piece of crap you got. We'll call it 750 watts and it's good. And if it explodes, it explodes. Newegg's just going to make people buy it with a graphics card anyway. On the higher end, which that's actually what they did with the exploding 750s from Gigabyte, by the way, with the 4000 series. That was a great video by Gamers Nexus a few years ago. On the higher end, what they do is they either work with the power supply manufacturer to develop a design for their models and use that design across the higher end, or they provide their own design and just say, hey, make this to this spec. It has to meet these requirements for ripple voltage and for noise and all of that. And well, ripple is noise, but you get what I'm saying. It has to meet these requirements. And by the way, we need them cybernetics, whatever spec they have certified. And usually the power supply ODM will do that. And then they ship them a pallet of naked power supplies and say, here you go. And here's the cables for them. You go box them up and ship them out. And that's usually how it works on the higher end, from my understanding. Granted, I don't work in that segment, but I have looked into it a bit, and that's what it looks like goes on to me. And with every brand name, you're going to have a lot of variance in how they handle that. MSI, for example, for their power supply might completely rely on the design knowledge of the ODM, which, the ODMs are not dumb. They know how to make crap power supplies. They know how to make phenomenal power supplies. It's just how much you want to pay them to do it. And same thing with Gigabyte. Gigabyte probably just says, hey, we want to slap our name on a power supply and, give us these tiers. And we want to meet these specifications. But somebody like Corsair or even Antec, because believe it or not, Antec is still selling power supplies.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which is funny, because as I was getting rid of a bunch of junk, I actually found my TPQ 1200 that I had in 2009. I mean, that power supply was a beast and a half, and it ran like nobody's business. And so, you get companies that have that design expertise, and the ODM is just there to basically throw things together and make PCBs. So your mileage will really vary depending on the brand, and that's where I would say we want to trust good reviewers like Gamers Nexus, who has their whole power supply testing set up, or any of the electrical specialist reviewers out there looking at power supplies to give you a good idea of what power supplies are going to handle the load. They're going to be the quietest. They're going to have the least ripple voltage, because those are the power supplies that if you toss it in your system, the odds are it's going to survive 3 or 4 different systems before you have to replace it. My Corsair HX 1100i that I have right now is, I think, a good example of that. It's a solid power supply, and unless I'm going to go to an SFF build, I see no reason to replace it when I do a new build. But yeah, power supplies are one of those interesting things that I don't think it would be fair for NVIDIA to blame the power supply vendors or blame ATX 3.0 compliant versus certified, because I think if they start going down that route, a lot of people who are electrical engineers are going to say, okay, great. So if it has to be ATX 3.0 certified, why do you ship a cable with the 4090 that gives you 4 PCI Express by 8 ports that you're supposed to use? Because the power supplies that do that aren't certified. And by the way, why don't you have any fuses on your power stages?
I mean, I like that. That's where I go to. As I said, I feel like, why we didn't see this in the 3090 is because if you look at the power design of those power stages, it was way more robust. And the 40 series went away to this very, very simplified design. And that it tells me that no issues in the 30 series, and I have plethora of problems in the 40 series. Yep. I have the same design in the 50 series, and I'm still having the same problems. So the power design is the issue. And I realistically asked the question, behind the scenes, do we think there's going to be a version 2 layout of these boards that addresses that? It very well could.
Possibly. If they come out with a 5080 Super, we might see an improved power layout. But the problem is that NVIDIA screwed down their partners so much on this that their partners had no room to move with the power design. And so Zotac could throw all the fuses in there that they want, and it's not going to make a hill of beans worth of difference, because you have to be able to support 600 watts worth of power plus enough overhead to handle the transient spikes up to, I think it was 900 to 1100 watts, that you can't really fuse that effectively. You would have to fuse the individual power stages, and the way the power stages are laid out around the GPU, there's no room to put a fuse. Maybe some smart engineer could figure out a way to route the power to fuse each power stage individually. So, if one of them all of a sudden starts pulling 100 amps, it pops and saves your core or saves your memory or whatever. But
the card's still dead there at that point.
It is, but you could send it to somebody like Northwest Repair to fix that and replace the inexpensive parts rather than the dead core.
Look, and I appreciate that. That's good, because cores are very difficult to come by because NVIDIA can't make them fast enough.
Right.
Nor does it seem like they can actually make them at all
reliably. Yeah.
with a full set. I just, when it comes to 50 series, and I've been skeptical, I have been nuts. Like at the beginning, I was super excited about it after the launch. And I just feel like when it's all said and done, I just feel like as we've come further and further away, I think that we've kind of maybe taken multiple step back, and I think we're viewing for what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a generational change. I don't think it's a very good card, to be honest. I just think it's okay at best,
Yeah. Well,
and I
and
think that that's uh, if I'm at a
yeah.
40 series, I'm look, and I would go out there to say if someone asked me like, should I get a 50 series?
Mhm.
I would say right now, I would absolutely wait. I would
Yeah.
absolutely wait to see what that looks like before I made any recommendations. What I would not recommend the 50 series right now. Um, if I had to get a GPU, um, I would still probably wait. I mean, my brother and me are in the same boat as are you. We're two generations back. He's got the 30 series. I have the 6000 series. So do you. Um, I don't know if 9000 is going to be enough to get me to upgrade this generation. Um, and I would just make the point that I really think when it's all said and done, I just think that this is going to be viewed long term as a meh at best
Mhm.
generation, and one that we sort of just is going to be like the question I actually really I bring up because I really think that the next generation needs to be a generational uplift,
Yeah.
and the question that we might be running into is how quickly can we get that generational performance that we expected from 5000 series, um, that's just non-existent,
Yeah.
and what are we actually going to see out of that? Because um, there were obviously compromises in 5000 series that people aren't super happy about.
Yeah. Well,
But
and one of those that's cropping up now is the lack of Physx.
yeah,
It's been removed from Blackwell, which,
32
I
bit,
mean,
32 bit. Let's make that clear.
well, okay. Yeah, that's not what I had seen, but okay.
It's
If it's
only the
just
third.
32-bit, then that's
It's
that's
the
not such a big deal.
the only
But
thing that they removed, and Nvidia did it very quietly, is 32-bit Physx support.
mhm.
64-bit games that were coded on 64-bit still work just fine.
Sure.
It's the 32-bit games. There's a handful of, I don't know, like 25 or 30 of them. They date back to like the late 2010, like the late 2000s to early 20 teens.
Yeah.
um, there are some pretty big names in there. Um, so it's not that it won't work. I think that you can toggle it off in a lot of these games, but you will see a performance hit because it's going to shoot that off to the CPU and it's going to be slow.
Yeah.
Um, it
Or
does not,
or just not use it. Like in the case of
or
Borderlands 2
well,
and Batman Arkham Asylum,
Borderlands 1 was not a Physx game. Borderlands 2 is.
I thought one was. I'm
Nope.
guess I remember wrong.
Borderlands 1 is not. It's not on the list that I have. Now, with that being said, I can't guarantee I know every game out there that's 32-bit Physx,
Right.
but
Batman
it
Arkham
begs the
Asylum though,
question.
I think is one of those that's
Batman
32-bit.
Arkham Asylum, yeah, yeah. It looks like the latest game I saw that had 32-bit support was like 2013, maybe 2014.
That was
It seemed
Metro
like
Last Light.
developers, yeah, Metro Last Light was on there, Metro 2033 was on there. Um, my guess is that some of these games will probably have a patch, but there are some games on here that will not get a patch, that are just not, that will never, like the dead games like Blur. I
Hmm.
played Blur way back in the day. It's a fun game. Um, it is fun, but um, it is a dead game.
Yep.
In fact, it's funny is that some of these you can actually see on freeware because or abandonware where developers have essentially abandoned it, so you can't even buy it in a store if you wanted to. The
Right.
developers are defunct. There's no one to collect the money on some of these games, um, and so you know, I don't know. I mean, for me, I get it, but it's not killing off Physx. It's just the 32-bit version of that. So again, I don't really think that's big of a deal.
Okay,
Um,
fair
the
enough.
one thing that's news wise that I do believe is a big deal um, is raw is the Halo Strix
Strix Halo. Yep.
390 Strix Halo.
The
Um,
Ryzen AI Max plus 395. And
Fine.
I
Oh my
did cheat.
gosh,
I had to read that from the slide.
it's so bad.
It's a terrible
Um,
name.
it's a horrible name, but the reviews are out now. We only have the ROG Z13 Flow, whatever the name is. There is a specific model that Asus it's the launch. There's a couple of sites that have got reviews on it.
Yep.
Um, a lot of those review sites are focused on CPU and AI performance. So I do believe that a number of the first level of these are probably going to be geared towards AI business like workstations
Yep.
rather than gamers. But the notion is that these are very well set up gaming chips.
Yeah.
It's beating or matching a laptop 4070. And keep in mind, that is a single die that is, or a single chip that is doing all of that. It's not a CPU and a dedicated GPU.
Hmm.
They are one and the same. So from a size perspective, from a power perspective, from a heat perspective, these are all going to be far superior than having a dedicated GPU. And in some respects, I mean, beating it handily 12, 15, 18% in some gaming situations
Hmm.
um, really is going to solidify AMD as the APU kind of leader. I mean, they already sort of are. I mean, they're in every PlayStation 5 and Xbox that has been sold for a very long time.
Yep.
Um,
Since the end of the 360 generation. So Xbox
exactly.
One, PS4, those are all AMD APUs.
And so
Now,
um,
they're licensed APUs, but it's still, that Microsoft and Sony
yeah,
made their own silicon, but it's still the same
designed
IP.
and
Yeah.
taped out. Yeah, it's all designed by AMD in house. This will go further to I think next generation that I think look, I believe AMD has already received the contract for PlayStation 6
Hmm.
for the same kind of contract. I think that's already been awarded. I'm not a console guy, so I can't verify that, but I'm pretty sure that was news a couple of months ago.
I believe
Um,
it was, yeah. I think we talked about
and
it.
I think we did. I don't know if we'll. The question is like, will we see a another generation on Microsoft side? That's a good question. I don't know if we will see that. That's a very good question for Xbox gaming. I would have a hard time believing that they would walk away from that because they do make money, and I do believe there's incentive for them to make console gaming attractive, especially considering how many different titles and studios they now own and
Hmm.
haven't shut down quite yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting. You should absolutely look at that. If you're in the market for a gaming laptop, that is something I would absolutely consider. Now, the other thing I would say is we do have 50 series laptops that are coming out in this not too far distant future. So how this will go up against a 5070 laptop, that's a good question. We don't know. I don't think, to be honest, I don't think I've heard really much about performance on 50 series in laptops almost at all. I don't think we've really
Yeah.
seen anything.
I haven't.
Um, it seems like that. So just take it with a grain of salt. If you're in the market, I mean, these are not cheap laptops. The cheapest one is 2,300 for the Z Flow, and then the bigger one with 128 gigs is 27 2,800, I think, in that ballpark, US dollars.
Yeah,
So
and
these aren't cheap.
not upgradable too, right?
That is not upgradable. So you
Yeah.
really, the other cool thing that I did see about this, and this is why I think it's maybe geared more towards workstations, is that because that is a part of the APU, your system memory, that is not an upgradable piece. But the cool piece about these is that you can actually change how much memory is set apart for your CPU versus how much is set apart for your GPU. So this is where the 32 gig model really kind of runs into issues, because if I give you 16 gigs on the GPU, I'm really only leaving myself 16 gigs in system memory.
Hmm.
And it's not the end of the world at 16, but if you go to the 24 gig for the system, I mean, for the GPU, that really is only leaving you with 8. And I would question if that's really enough, especially with Windows 11 and how much memory it uses and how
Yeah.
much memory, browsers and games use. I just don't know. This is where I think the higher um, RAM model is going to be one that would be highly advised, albeit that they are absolutely charging an arm and leg at $500 for that. But you are getting 128 gigs. At 128 gigs, you could easily have 24 gigs for your GPU and still have 104. This is why I think we probably will see 64 gig versions of these. There is
Hmm.
an AMD chip version, so it does 32, 64, and 128. So there is a 64. I believe that's probably going to be a very popular size, because at that point you would be able to have 24 and 40. And that's a very good split.
Yeah.
That will be very interesting to see where that chip lands, because I mean this. Um, Minis Forum, I'm sure, will have a version of, or multiple versions of this. I could see with the gaming performance, see some very interesting topics of conversation coming down the line of talking about a Steam Deck, Steam Machine 2, not a
Hmm.
Steam Deck. Um, this is a big, big jump over what we're seeing with the Z1 and Z2 Extreme. I think a lot of what they've learned in those chips really kind of went into this, and this is really an evolution of the APU.
Yeah.
Um, this could be the start of APUs being wildly popular and having small
Yeah.
forms where you have Windows 11 certified, gaming little set tops that would replace the Xbox.
Well, it's what the Steam machine originally was supposed to be, but it turned into kind of this debacle of full desktop hardware stuck in a basically VCR or DVD player chassis. And it just didn't work well. Like it worked, but
Well,
the way they played it with the Steam Deck, I think was smart. Was get it into get the hardware into people's hands, get the refinements that we need, and then let's start iterating on the design as hardware matures. And I think what we might potentially see here, unlike your suspicion, because remember, Valve said that there would not be a new Steam Deck until there was a major change in hardware. And I would argue that Strix Halo is that major change. Now,
that's not going to be a Steam Deck, though. That's going to be a Steam Machine. And I think
it
we're going to have a
could be.
differentiation between those two.
Well, see, I'm wondering if Valve
Steam,
might go the route of the Switch, because you know how the Switch has its dock and it
I think that would be a
unlocks
bad
extra
idea.
TDP. It
That
might
would be a
be.
bad idea.
It might be.
Um, they need to start getting. Steam Deck has been very popular,
Mm-hmm.
and the beauty about Steam Deck from Steam's and Valve's perspective is it gets them a ton of developers coding and getting their knowledge and understanding and refinement for Linux as a gaming platform really, really solid. Because
that's the thing. They don't even have to develop for Linux for the most part.
But what I'm saying is that that's been the big, that they've got to get the Steam OS working. And I think that's where the Steam Deck has been really good at, is getting a lot of users and getting some refinements and getting developers to develop for them. Now, the question will be, is if, next generation of consoles come around and Microsoft says, thanks, but no thanks, we're not going to do another one, and they go down their path, that's where Steam and the Steam machine is going to be good. I think Steam probably needs to get this out before, but I don't think we're really super close to having. I mean, we just had the PS5 Pro come out. I don't think PS6 is slated at least until I think 27, and it's probably a late 27 if I don't know. I don't know how quickly they turn around, but I would guess 27 is the earliest we would see. I think it would be very smart. I mean, I'll put it this way. If they made a Steam machine, I would buy it.
Yeah.
I actually would. The Steam Deck, I see the benefit of it, but I sort of was like, no, I'd prefer to have it. But a Steam machine, something that I could take somewhere and play with a controller or a Bluetooth controller, does seem wildly attractive. And for me personally, I would have a lot of value in something like that.
Yeah. More like a media box that plays games rather than something handheld. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense for your kind of use case. I am really hoping for a Steam Deck 2 because I'm going to be traveling quite a bit more, and so having the ability to pull it out on an airplane or get to a hotel and I don't have to spend all this time and effort setting up my laptop, which
I think. Look, I do believe that a Steam machine and a Steam Deck can share the same hardware. I'm not suggesting that, but I do believe that there is some benefit. Plus, I do think the ability to have where you don't have to worry about battery is helpful. And Steam on the machine side of this could make it, this is the highest fidelity because you can sit there and say, I don't have to worry about a battery. There's a lot of benefits. And the question is will they actually pick it up and run with it? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yep. And well, on that bombshell, I think we'll call it a show for this evening. Thank you all for watching. Do remember to like and subscribe and do all the algorithmic goodness down the doobly-doo that YouTube's overlords makes us ask you to do so that we can grow as a channel. And we appreciate you giving us a little bit of your day. So until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.